Always true.
We ask the questions.
What is needed in the world?
Is that going to be?
Of all the sovereign nations of Africa, only 3 are monarchies. In 2 of them, Morocco and Swaziland, the king plays an important role in politics. However, the King of Lesotho is legally not allowed to do so, but that may be about to change.
If the people say this is what we want, then I'm ready for it.
Today, on Talk to Al Jazeera, the Kingdom of Lesotho. It is often described as one of the poorest countries in the world. Nevertheless, there are sources of stability and wealth. Most people here own their land and their homes. It is a democracy where people have a chance to express their views. And it has a king who is willing and anxious to help, if only they let him. Surrounded by South Africa, the people of Lesotho has always been dependent on the economy and political developments in the neighboring country. But in a couple of important respects, Lesotho is different. First of all, apartheid never existed here. The country is also less diverse. Most people speak the same language and share the same religion. Still, it is grappling with many serious social problems. Poverty is very high. Violent crimes are common. There are many reports of abuse against women, especially rape. The HIV epidemic is one of the highest in the world. For any head of state, those are bad headlines. For a king with limited political power, it can be frustrating.
I have no constitutional powers to intervene in public affairs or to settle disputes that may arise between different political factions or between sections of the population and their political leaders. So it does cause sometimes a bit of a problem or a frustration on my part.
Was 25% of the people identified as HIV positive, and with the fact that, in light of the fact that the Lesotho population is 1.9 million, don't you think that the nation is could be seen like an endangered nation?
Well, it's certainly very disturbing that we do have such a high infection rate of HIV among our population. I think we are the second most infected country in the world as we speak, in proportion to the population. So we have to individually and collectively continue with our efforts of reducing the infection rates and of rolling out treatment to those affected with the disease. I'm confident that with the necessary effort and the right policies we can achieve it. I am not yet feel that, that we are an endangered nation, but of course we face real and serious threats from HIV, which we have to tackle with great vigor.
I would like to ask you, what role has the monarch played, if any, in trying to bring down that epidemic?
Well, it's more of bringing to the attention as often as possible, at every opportunity, bringing the dangers that we are facing and trying to promote a behavior that will prevent HIV infections, particularly among young people. As you know, there is an International AIDS Day on the 1st of December, and I always take the opportunity on that day to highlight the issues of HIV and AIDS and address the nation and address our young people even the adults, that we really have to take responsibility and behave in a way that will reduce HIV infections. So that is basically my role, and I do that not only on the 1st of December, but on other occasions as well throughout the year. Not only myself, but also Her Majesty as well. We are very concerned, and we try as often as possible to highlight the issue of HIV and AIDS.
Sir, with the average person earning less than $2 a day, and in the light of the fact that the unemployment have reached 30%, Lesotho is considered to be one of the poorest countries in the world. Although a main recipient of foreign aid, why do you think all these development projects have failed so far to alleviate this state of abject poverty in Lesotho?
I can't give you a precise or a scientific answer to that question. Of course, you are right that Lesotho is one of the least developed countries, one of the poorest countries of the world, and we are facing quite serious situation of poverty throughout the country and high unemployment. But the contributing factors, I think, are multiple in nature.
Could it be the constant, almost the constant state of political instability and political crises that Lesotho has been witnessing since the independence? It might be the reason behind this, or maybe because many of these development projects were not custom-made in order to fulfill the real needs of the country.
I think you are right that some of the development projects that have been sponsored by the donor community have lacked sustainability because we have not been able to root them into the country, or the local communities were not able to take ownership of those projects. So very often over the years, once a project, you see a pattern where once a project ends and once the donor pulls out their finances, then the project collapses. It is common knowledge that in order to have sustainable economic growth and development, you need an environment of political stability. Regrettably, throughout our 50-year history as an independent country, we haven't really enjoyed a lengthy period where we can say we've been politically stable.
What the king is referring to is, among other things, 5 attempted coups since independence, causing political tension that affected the monarchy as well. In 1970, the king's father was forced to abdicate and go into exile in the Netherlands. 8 months later, he returned to assume the throne again. Then, in 1990, the father abdicated for the second time and moved to England. The son became king, only to see the father return and again assume the throne in 1995. The father was then tragically killed in a car crash. Less than a year later, the son was king again.
Could you tell us, for outsiders like us, it seems unusual.
Well,
what was behind all this?
It is still that environment which I've been talking about, the post-independence environment, which has not yielded political stability. And regrettably, every incident of instability in Lesotho cannot leave out the institution of the monarchy. So it is under that environment that my late father was forced to go into exile in the Netherlands. It is regrettable, but it happened. It's part of our history. And again, as you said, it was this time under military rule. There was another incident of instability. And again, the monarchy could not be left untouched by the problem. And my father went into exile again to the UK. So every incident, every constitutional incident, every constitutional crisis invariably involves the monarchy. Not that we create it, but it does affect us. And it has often, over the years, caused incidents of that nature. But I'm confident that since we now have a new constitution since '93, that at least those incidents of exile will not happen again. We have had problems of constitutional problems since '93, but luckily they have not led to anybody having to go. At least they have not led me to go to exile.
In a homogeneous country like Lesotho, where most of the people, if not all the people, speak the same language, they belong to the same ethnic group, and they even share the same faith, what might be the problem that causes such instability, that constant state of instability?
We are in a process of learning as a country. Our democracy is young, and our democracy is growing. We're still trying to strengthen our democratic institutions and to strengthen our democratic culture. So in that process of learning, we're going through trial and error. And unfortunately, it does create these incidences of instability from time to time. But we, all the leadership now in Lesotho have accepted that taking into account what has been happening up until now, it is obvious that we need to sit down together as a nation and reflect and see what we can do to strengthen, through a process of reform, all these important institutions, the parliament, the judiciary, the security sector, the public service, so that we can move forward stronger as we start a new cycle of 50 years of independence. So that is encouraging, that everybody is now in that frame of mind. We just have to start on that process, so that all of these things you are talking about will be left in the past for good.
And is it time to reform the monarchy as well? In our conversation, the king suggests he is ready to play a larger role, but under certain conditions.
Many of your own people, and we talked to some of them, would like to see you more politically engaged, whereas many of the politicians would fear to see that engagement. Do you sometimes feel that you're caught between a rock and a hard place?
It is sometimes difficult for me in my role to exercise my duties. Quite often, particularly during difficult times, and it has happened in the past, I have had people, groups of people, coming to me directly, seeking my intervention. But as far as I'm concerned, I am committed to the principles of a constitutional monarchy. But however, One, if there is a view among the population that I could have a role in one way or another, as I was saying, there is a process which is about to begin of reform, reforming the constitution, and views can be viewed, can be placed, and can be aired in that process, and then we can see the people can determine on what kind of amendments they can make to the constitution, so that the office of the monarch can be able to answer some of the problems that they from time to time put to that office. But we must be careful that in doing so we do not surrender the principles of a constitutional monarchy, and we do not at the same time try to usurp the powers of the elected government. So it will have to be a very balanced exercise. But at the end of the day, it depends on the views of the people and the collective views of the people and their leadership.
While the process of reforming the monarchy might be slowly moving ahead, the king has already encountered some controversy. Just this past summer, he traveled to Zimbabwe to meet the president, Robert Mugabe. The purpose? According to local media headlines, the king asked Mugabe for advice, especially on how to maintain political stability. Allegations the king denies.
It was more of a courtesy call. I didn't ask him about any of our domestic issues. It was speculation. You know how we sometimes like to speculate.
But the king admits there is a special relationship with Mr. Mugabe formed back in the 90s, when his father had been forced into exile.
You mentioned in the past, in your previously, that my father was forced into exile for the second time in 1990, when President Mugabe is president of Botswana, of Zimbabwe, and the president of Botswana, and later President Mandela, who had just come into office, played a very constructive role in seeing that my father returns to the country and subsequently returned to the throne. Because I felt, the reason why I said in restoring legitimacy, I felt that that situation where I was in the office of the king, with my father being alive, was very much an illegitimate situation and a very abnormal situation. So the fact that, and I think the regional leaders also recognized this, and President Mugabe and others were quite active and gave us moral and other support to make sure that the legitimacy is returned to the throne.
One natural resource abundant in Lesotho is water, but still the supply is often interrupted. Many in the country are pointing at Kat's Dam, a huge construction built to supply water to the neighboring country. As a result, critics say water goes to South Africa while the people in Lesotho suffer.
Well, I think those are two separate issues. Kat's Dam was conceived from the beginning, or the Lesotho Highlands Water Project, as a project specifically to supply our neighbors with water. That's how it was from the beginning. And none of that water, or at least most of it, was not supposed to be used for domestic purposes. But we still do have other water projects within the country that should and hopefully will increase the supply of water to the population. Recently, we commissioned a smaller dam not too far away from here, Mitulung Dam, which is supposed to feed water to Maseru and other neighboring towns. And I know there are in the pipeline other ideas to extend water supply further up north and further down south. So Kazizit is a separate issue, but we still have to develop what we do with water supply inside the country.
So it's not about the water resources as much as it's about the infrastructure to supply the water to the citizens.
Comparatively speaking, Lesotho does have more water than most countries.
Yes, indeed.
So we just have to harness it and take care of it and take care of the infrastructure and maintain the infrastructure better.
In one aspect, the king of Lesotho is different from other kings of Africa. He is a Catholic, and unlike the other royals, he doesn't practice polygamy. Instead, he has only one wife.
You stand out among your own peers.
Well, I'm not sure about that. You know, you'll probably, when you read our history, you will discover that my forefathers, in fact, as far as recent as my grandfather, they practiced polygamy. But my father decided to break that practice. So I grew up in a family where there was only husband and wife, not husband and wives. So that, of course, is something which has influenced me. I wouldn't discount the influence of my faith in the decisions I've made. And I've always felt that it is nigh impossible to give full attention to more than one wife. So I'm happy with one spouse, and I wouldn't imagine having more than one spouse at any time.
This country has been witnessing an increasing rate of crime, rape, women abuse, and violations and abuse by the police, and even torture. Do you receive regular reports about these incidents? And if yes, how would you react? What is your reaction?
Well, I as a citizen of this country and as a leader and the head of state, I'm very much aware of the problems that we are having of violence against women, violence against young children, and generally the violence within the population against each other, the murder rates, and so on and so forth. And it is an issue which I took the opportunity to raise when I was opening Parliament, this 10th Parliament last month, to highlight it and to see and seek a commitment from the government to stand up and fight together with the population to fight this scourge of violence, because it is alarming and it is disturbing. So that I cannot deny.
Your Majesty, thank you very much for talking to Al Jazeera.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much.